Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 15th video here on this 84-part series where I talk about spiritual concepts that can change your life. In this video's topic, I'm going to expand on the previous video and talk about some things that I wanted to say but didn't remember at the time, as well as some new things that I think should be brought towards your attention. The first thing that I'm going to say, or that I want to say rather, is that the reason why I changed my name, my legal name. This is an interesting story because right as the pandemic was in its full force, that was the most beneficial and lucrative time for me when it comes to insight and me understanding certain things. I'm very grateful that this thing happened because it brought a lot of awareness to a lot of people on Earth. This being said, sometime during the pandemic, I realized suddenly that my name, it wasn't actually mine. But even deeper, I realized that I actually don't have a name. I don't have a name, and neither do you. Now, whether you know this or not is really up to you and your level of insight, but you may have a conventional name, whatever your parents chose to name you. That's your name conventionally, but that's really not you. That's not your essence. That's not who you are. And so I realized that I actually don't have a name. And it was quite funny because, my parents obviously gave me a name and it was a good name, but it was something, it was just a sound that they liked and they labeled me that, which is fine and understandable. So after that awareness, I decided to change my legal name. Actually, it was a very sudden realization that one day I was cleaning my room and I kneeled down and I could very clearly see and perceive that I should change my name. It was just sudden. It wasn't like I was thinking that, okay, this is something that I need to do. It was just all of a sudden, boom, in an instance. And I knew what I needed to change my name to. And then I took all of the paperwork and documents and I went ahead and through the process. It's interesting to note that in some cultures here on planet Earth, and also in the galaxies that surround us, in different planets, in our own galaxy as well, and in different evolved civilizations, that the choosing of a name for a baby is done with a person that perceives the sound of the being. So you can imagine 10 babies being born, and each individual child has a sound frequency that is coming out of them. And if you pinpoint that sound, you can match that sound with a name. And that child can take that name and can be called that name for the remainder of their life. So in a sense, you can constantly be affirming that sound in them, which is very favorable because whatever karma and background you've brought to this planet of who you are, to be able to reaffirm that or to claim that is has a lot of strength and power to it. The second thing that I want to clarify here that I mentioned yesterday is that the sound Shiva, first of all, this sound has done very wonderful things to me. It, in a span of 2 weeks, allowed me to change my living circumstances so dramatically. It probably would have taken me a year or two, an average person even longer, the same time or longer. Whereas I just started chanting this sound, Shiva, over and over again, and my living circumstances were burned. Sometimes even literally. So this sound Shiva is, I mentioned yesterday, is like fire, and that's true, but I said whatever I said yesterday without really thinking about it. After closer examination, I would choose to say that Shiva is like a blue flame. You know, blue isn't really a hot fire. It is cool, or it's cooler than the other flames, I believe. This might not be true. I don't really know, but it sounds true. And so the sound Shiva is like hot but cold, cool but warm. And if you chant it repetitively over and over again, it's very easy to perceive what that sound does. Maybe the easiest sounds to chant. And it will burn you. It will burn your impurities. It will burn your living circumstances. It will bring forth dramatic change and destruction. That sounds scary and dangerous, but it's not. You know, if you are stuck somewhere or with something, the best thing you can do is to detach, or we can say is to, you know, what I'm trying to get at is that destruction is not in a literal form. It's not like you're going to get your house destroyed or your body destroyed, but you're going to get your ignorance destroyed. You're going to get your delusion destroyed. And through that, making change in the physical world is very easy. So chant this sound, Shiva, and find out for yourself. The last thing that I'm going to share with you here is a kind of observation. Back in Toronto, I lived in many places, but most recently I lived next to the Lake Ontario. And I originally thought that it would be good and wise to live next to water, that huge body of water, for there's kind of like romantic reasons. But later, as it turned out, it was one of the worst mistakes that we could have made. For reasons I'm going to share. As well as, I don't believe living close to the ocean is wise, at least when you're on a spiritual path and you want to accomplish specific things. When we lived close to the Lake Ontario, what happens is that structure of water, that huge body of water, it has such a massive influence over everything that is close to it. Now, water's influence from the beach to, let's say, maybe a kilometer, or actually less than a kilometer, maybe a couple of 100 meters, is quite strong. And if you live within that space, you are in essence being blown by the wind that is touching the water. And that wind is blowing all kinds of energy that you can't control or you can't hold. So whereas if you were living, let's say, 1 mile inland, away from the water or ocean, the wind's quality is of a different nature, and it doesn't blow your energy in various directions. So what I've noticed is that it's very hard to get rooted and stable next to the ocean. If you're living within its kind of like, it's like if you drop a bomb somewhere and the bomb explodes, that bomb has a radius of its impact. It's an immediate radius. And then afterwards, it has a second radius of things that get burned. And then has a third radius and a fourth and fifth, many different radiuses. And the very last radius that it has is the sound wave that emanates from the explosion. And when it finally dissipates, I don't know how many hundreds of kilometers that is, that's the final radius. So what I'm talking about, the ocean is similar. It has a radius, let's say 20 meters, 30 meters, I don't really exactly know, but you can feel it. If you get close to the ocean, okay, there's a certain sense that you're now in the vicinity of this kind of large being, we can call it. And if you live within this ocean, if you live within this radius, then you can't help but to be manipulated by that water. Whatever the quality of the water is, you'll be manipulated. You won't be able to establish yourself firmly. You won't really be able to root yourself. And forget about energy work. That energy will just wash away, and yeah. So so if you live next to a polluted river or body of water, you will take on that quality. Whereas if you live next to the ocean, I mean, it's obviously much better. It's much more favorable, but still, it's not really conducive towards, let's say, if you want to make your house into a temple, if you want to energize your house, if you want to consecrate your house, it's almost impossible to do that if you are living next to the ocean. Like I said, because the quality and the waves, so to speak, will just wash that energy constantly, every day. You won't be able to establish yourself in that space. Luckily, here and now, where I'm living, we are just outside of that radius, as I talked about. So I'm not close to the ocean. I'm about 1 mile away from the ocean, or maybe 30 minutes walk away from the ocean. And that's just something interesting to talk about and to think about and contemplate. So see this for yourself. If you live next to a body of water, when you commute, there is a certain change that happens in your own nervous system when you get close to that water. It could be 50 meters away, it could be 200 meters away, or farther, but there's a definite shift. If you can notice that shift, you'll know when you reach that point. The end.